Have you been bit? I said, have you been bit? Well, get in here then. Well, I'm glad you're not dead. Welcome to the guild.
Well, you're looking well.
Thank you.
I mean, I was surprised. I was expecting half of your body parts to be hanging off at this point.
I'm surprisingly well preserved. It's all the brains. It's a youthful vigour I've got. A youthful vigour.
Now, where are you getting these brains from? Firstly, I don't know how you're still in here, but where are you getting these brains from? Because there's not many survivors. You know what I mean?
Well, no, but there's ways and means, Ben. Ways and means. First of all,
are you eating survivors in this compound?
No, I've set up my own lobotomy clinic. Is what I've done. I've set up my own lobotomy clinic where I invite people in to cure what ails them, and then I just take a little slither off the side.
Oh, so what you're doing is you're getting the Trump voters in.
Yeah, that's it.
And you're cutting the asshole out of their brains.
Yeah.
Not the asshole, the trait being an asshole out of their brains, and then you're eating that.
I am, and it's very tasty. People come back for more and stuff like that, and slowly but surely, I see it's a renewable source of food. It's very ecologically friendly.
But are you not worried about you are what you eat? Don't you think you'll turn into an asshole at some point? I mean, more of an asshole at some point.
No, I don't think that's possible because, first of all, I am the best. I'm a genius, and second of all, make America great. Then, so it's fun.
Well, again, I think is the operative word.
Yes. Yes.
But the point is, you need to explain this to me because I've looked at your brethren.
Yes.
And they're all there shambling, going, meh. I mean, the most they can get out is sort of nice ass as I walk by.
Yeah.
Because I am telling you, the apocalypse has done wonders for my waistline.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, how come you're so eloquent? I mean, obviously everything's relative, but how come you're so eloquent?
Well, it helps if you start off at a very high level. Because obviously, I was a cut above the rest of humanity to begin with.
Back in the olden days before the world ended, I often woke up in the middle of the night thinking, if I was a tenth as intelligent as Dan Hughes, then I would be slightly intelligent.
Exactly, yeah. So, but the other thing is with, and I know what you're saying about the slovenly appearance and things like that. What happens when you zombify is you tend to go to the opposite of what you were. Now, fortunately for me, I was already slovenly, smelt very bad, and shambled around with hunched shoulders.
If we're talking about the opposite, I imagine you were able to pronounce the word slovenly as well in your former life.
Possibly. I don't know. But there's no need to vocab shade me, Ben. I'm here trying to.
All bets are off in this brave new world. I can do what I want.
Fair enough. Well, in that case, if you'd like to step over here, I could show you my shiny new lobotomy clinic.
I like all of my brain. And I've got no brain to spare.
Really? You've got no personality quirks that you'd like to...
Honestly, I really get off on the sort of resentment that is 97% of my brain.
Yeah.
And I love every microgram of it. I couldn't give you even a bit. And to be honest, I'm sure it's fairly foul.
Yeah, but you can definitely spare some of that narcissism, though. And some of the pomposity as well, and the pretension. Your pretension glands must be so swollen, Ben.
The problem is, if you cut out the pretension part of my brain, then I'm just rattling around with a walnut inside my head.
I suppose so. But it looks mighty juicy from over here, from where I'm stood.
I mean, you should listen to if you don't already, and if you don't, I'm very surprised. My reviews, that's all they are. All I do is focus all of my pretension into 5 minutes.
Exactly, yeah. I've heard people use it to dry their hair, all that hot. Basically, you turn on your podcast, and then all the hot air just dries instantly. It's fantastic.
I was very last year, before everything went south, I came to your gaming convention at Gearstones, and there was a picture put up on Facebook, and I was rather disheartened by the fact that everyone went, "Oh, Dan looks exactly as I'd imagine him." Ben looks nothing like it. And I assume what they meant is, fucking hell, what a state. He sounds so posh.
Sounds so posh, yet he looks like some kind of vagrant, basically.
Not some kind of vagrant, a vagrant.
Very possibly.
But it's homeless chic was very in at that time, which allowed me to adapt to the apocalyptic world very well.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. It's good. I'm glad something at least went right for you.
But last time we were having a drink in here, did I have my segue yet?
You had, yes. You were looking very dashing on it.
Because I go around the Segway and I improve the morale of people by asking them getting sentences out. I get sentences out.
Very good.
Asking them questions about board games.
Right. Okay.
So I like to make people wistful and nostalgic, and so I asked them, what was the state of the hobby? And before the world ended, and so. Imagine we're back in those heady days.
I will try.
Boris Johnson is about to become Prime Minister.
Marvellous days they were, yeah.
Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump are holding hands.
Yeah, marvellous. Wonderful.
The world is run by people of strong, stiff moral character.
Yeah, the Brexit Party were not making me ashamed to be British at all in the slightest.
No, did you see that picture? There was the one of the Brexit Party, and then there was the one of the new Nazi MPs back in 1933. Oh, Nigel Farage.
Yes. What a wonderful world. Yes.
The only thing I'm happy about is I saw another zombie biting his bollocks off outside the fence the other day. So that was good.
Very good. Very good.
If anyone should have died in a plane crash. Anyway, so... What do you think? Take yourself back to those heady times.
I will.
What do you think is the state of the hobby? How do you feel about it?
Well, I've been doing some thinking about this because I got a faint heads up that this was what you wanted to talk to me about.
Well, to be fair, I wanted to talk to you about this because you're a miserable old bloke, and I'd assume you'd have a very negative spin, which would be entertaining.
That is exactly the approach you're going to get. Yeah. Well, no, and I think to kind of preface this. Go on, your vocab.
Oh, your pronunciation is almost perfect.
Anyway, as a starter, I'd like to say I am coming from a position where I am particularly grumpy. I've had a particularly grumpy day, and we can only speak. These questions are interesting because you can only ever speak from your own perspective, and I've got a very different perspective than the person fresh into the hobby. I've got a very different perspective from somebody who isn't involved in kind of board game media or things like that, who isn't, all that kind of stuff.
Well, I listen to Sporadically Bored. You're certainly not involved in board game media.
That is very true. I have a past history of being involved in board game media, and now I'm involved in rambling inanities media.
But it is really interesting. I'll allow you to speak in a second. But it is interesting, right, how your perspective on gaming changes once that initial sheen has come off, right?
It certainly is. And it's almost universal from the people I talk to. Most of my friends who started gaming at roughly the same time as me are as not disenfranchised and not disenchanted with the hobby, but have that initial gleaming optimism completely worn off. And I wonder if that's the same in every single hobby. The initial enthusiasm dies, and you're left being able to see the warts and all type thing.
It was really interesting. I was listening to one of your old broadcasts the other day, and you were talking about how all the games that you'd bought in that initial flood of love are all gone, and you were talking about how you'd never play the Resistance anymore, and yet you completely loved it when you were first there.
Yeah. And I don't think there's anything wrong with me back then. I don't think that I was wrong to like the Resistance. I just think my tastes have changed and become more refined even, and that you narrow down what you like, and you slowly push out what you like less. And ultimately, I probably still enjoy a game of Resistance. It's just there's so many games I'd rather play than Resistance. Is
it the inevitable descent into conservatism, do you think?
Well, possibly. I have been thinking about the inevitable descent into conservatism recently, as I get older and do become faintly more right wing. I mean, I was basically quite left wing in the first place, but shift towards a different the centre. Maybe I think it's more to do with the lack of novelty. I mean, when you first start in the board gaming hobby, everything is new and shiny. It's amazing, and you've never seen anything that does this before, and you've never seen anything that does that before. But now I've seen all the new games. I've seen hundreds of games.
Right.
I've got hundreds of games that have done that before, and so in order to find something new, you're getting more and more detail orientated. It's less a big splash, and it's more focusing on the tiny differences, and they're not as exciting as my goodness, it's a cooperative game. I never played anything cooperative before, and then so your excitement is less because the revelations are less dramatic. I
mean, do you ever get anywhere near approximating that with a new game anymore?
No, I think I've talked to you about this before, but no, I don't. No, I don't think so. I don't feel the same excitement at gaming as I did. I still find it as nourishing as I did, and as a nourishing experience. And I still very much count myself as being enthusiastic about the hobby, as it were. But I don't think that initial. It's like a relationship. That initial flush is not sustainable. Well,
I mean, you don't have enough zinc in your body for a start.
Exactly. But that initial rush of heady excitement isn't sustainable. I don't think. I think once you become familiar with things, once you become used to things, it settles down into a comfortableness and a nourishment and an appreciation rather than an excitement and an exhilaration and a thrill.
I think it's interesting because I think I've still managed to maintain a sort of perspective in which I play pretty much anything someone puts in front of me. Mm-hmm. But I do remember when I first got into gaming and I would watch reviews on YouTube and people would say they didn't like a certain game, and I thought, how can you not like a game, right? Every game I've played I adore. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely amazing. And as you get more wizened, as you get older, you enter a groove that you enjoy walking around, right?
And sometimes you skip out that groove and land in a different groove, and that's a way of keeping the excitement going. You move from your favourite. Just to use a Matthew Juden example, you move from your favourite designer being Stefan Feld, you skipped over to it being Rainer Knizia, who designs very different types of games.
It's fucking nuts, right? I mean, I got into the hobby 2012.
Yeah.
And this was when Knizia was in a sort of trough.
Yeah.
And I played no Knizia games. And then the last year and a half, and especially since I interviewed him, and what happened to him is a disaster, but we won't go into that. I've truly realised, now I understand what everyone was talking about. He is the fucking best designer who's ever lived, right?
Yeah. And there's many people. I mean, he's definitely in the. There's a what is it? A Knizia or something. Renaissance, yeah, whatever. There's the renaissance of Rainer Knizia. He's become rehabilitated into the upper echelons, really, when before he was out of fashion, really, a bit like Queen or Elton John.
Right.
And now people are rediscovering that work. And I think that's very much happened with Reiner Knizia, and he deserves it. There's many people who claim him as their favourite designer now who wouldn't have done 2 years ago.
Yeah, me too. I mean, favourite designer, I'm not sure, but someone whose games I play.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that thing, when you play modern art, you just suddenly go, oh, I get this now. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, I don't know where my point was going there, but yeah, there's skipping a groove. That's it. So you can reinvigorate yourself a little bit by.
So you're slipping your point into a groove. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, slipping my point into a groove. So you can reinvigorate yourself. I'm just going to ignore any double entendres you're giving me. I'm not even going to rise.
They're actually, this is very
rise to it.
transgressive. They're banned on the compound. So
really,
I am taking my life in my hands.
Exactly. The modern censorship.
Indeed.
The new Puritanism.
My favourite ship is the censorship.
So yes, but going back to your question, I'd like to split the hobby, because the hobby is quite a broad term.
Yeah.
Into kind of three really, and there's three aspects of the hobby that I find important. I'm not saying these are the only aspects, but there's the industry,
right?
The actual business. There's the media surrounding the hobby, kind of the media, and there's a consumer, and I think in two of those.
Where do you see yourself placed in that?
I see myself firmly between media and consumer.
Because even though you're falsely modest, often, I mean, you certainly are part of the media, right? And you have been for a while.
Yes. But less so now than I was before, and well, I'll go into this. I think currently the state of the hobby is the media has started slowly but very, very clearly to identify itself with the industry rather than the consumer.
Well, I think it's clear, isn't it, that we've seen, so someone like me who makes almost no money, and yet, because I'm a bit of a dickhead, I kind of like to say my role is for the consumer, not for the industry. I'm not interested whether they like me or not. But it's clear the way to money is to cozy up with publishers because they'll give you money, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the monetarisation of board game media is becoming more and more a justification in itself. Previously, there was a very punk rock attitude,
right.
A very DIY attitude towards board game media. It was very grassroots. It was very, and I would argue podcasting is still on the whole within this. Actually,
yeah.
I think podcasting, as opposed to, and even written reviews, to be fair. So I'm not saying all board game media, but certainly as opposed to YouTube, which is by far the most popular form of board game media. YouTube is definitely going corporate.
Right.
It's definitely going marketing. It's definitely, I'm not going to get into the whole money for reviews thing because I do recognise that is a relatively rare case, although it does happen. But there's definitely money for previews going on, and again, I'm not interested in the preview review debate and things like that. But what is definitely happening is board game media people are being turned into board game marketing people. They may not be directly employed by the publisher to publish just for them, but their entire business model is surrounding being a tool of advertising rather than a tool for the consumer.
Now, people may rail against this, but what you see is an absolute deluge of positivity.
Yeah.
And the point is, we've just spoken about this earlier in this, most of these people who are making videos and doing this sort of thing are wizened old heads when it comes to games now. So they can't like bloody everything. And so I'm very suspicious of a deluge of positivity. Even if they are previews, editorial creeps into a preview, right? And if someone's getting money, I don't trust the editorial. And that's an issue then.
Yeah. And I think the consumer has to be wary of that, really. And as long as the consumer recognises that the media and the industry are cozying up, then they can be wary and they can take things with pinches of salt and things like that.
But do people do that?
Well,
I mean, people are prone to believe people going, honestly, this is amazing. People are prone to that, right?
Yeah.
It's very attractive.
It is, and that's why advertising works ultimately.
Right.
And whether that's for good or ill, I don't want to say. I mean that there is a very definite need for publishers and industry to get the message out about their products. There is no magazine they can advertise in. There's no radio show they can. There's no adverts they can insert into television programs and things like that. They need to. The whole of the marketing budget for a board game is by paying media creators to talk about their games, or by either directly by giving them money or indirectly by sending them review copies.
I can get onto that, but I'm not. I don't see that as marketing personally. But anyway, because I get sent review copies.
But it will come out of the marketing budget of a publisher,
right? Of course. And but I think ironically, the internet has kind of harmed neutrality to some degree, because I think if board games had had this boom in 1994. There would have been a number of board game magazines who would be hiring people to create content about board games. And the thing is, if you have... I was speaking to Owen Duffy the other day, who's the writer for The Guardian. Mm-hmm. Now, The Guardian pay him, so he can say what the fuck he likes. And which board game publisher is going to say to The Guardian, no, we're not going to give you a review copy because you wrote a bad review of our last game, right? Because they're the fucking Guardian, fundamentally. But that doesn't exist. That's one example in the whole of board game media, right?
It sort of does, because I would argue that Shut Up and Sit Down and the Dice Tower both have the clout. Maybe they won't be given games, but they will go out and buy them and say whatever they want about them. And both of those are very different in kind of style and genre and all that kind of stuff. I personally have a lot of faith in both of those outlets' integrity. I don't agree with them all the time.
My only issue with Shut Up and Sit Down is they have publicly stated that they're very selective on what they review, and they are predisposed to reviewing games they like.
Yes, that is true.
Which I think is... It's only a couple of guys and they only have so much time, of course. But I think that's inherently problematic in and of itself, right?
I don't know how you get around that, though, with that site, unless you do the Dice Tower, which is splurge everything that,
Right.
But the quality of your reviews goes down, and Tom would admit that obviously there's not the same amount of time and effort put into a Dice Tower review as there is a Shut Up and Sit Down review.
Well, of course, what you do is you have an organ like The Guardian who say, you're reviewing this, tell us what you think. If you like it or not, it's not an issue, right? That's the problem. And as I say...
I'd be curious to know if Owen Duffy brings it to The Guardian or The Guardian brings it to Owen Duffy, though. The actual games to review.
I didn't ask him that. I was very...
Because I would suspect that Owen brings the games to The Guardian, because The Guardians they're not going to know what's going on.
I assume.
Yeah, so therefore there is selectiveness, and he's only got 3 games he can cover in a thing as well.
Right. So enough of the navel gazing. So you split it into the industry, media, and the consumers.
So, in my opinion, and this is coming from a grumpy man who has got a long history of railing against the monetarisation of all the media. I used to be a parent blogger, and I got so disenchanted with the whole medium when sponsored posts started coming in and influencing and all that kind of stuff. I quit then because I got the punk rockness of it, the being on the side of the reader rather than the companies trying to sell you things. And
I grew up in the Bill Hicks age. Do you remember this Bill Hicks thing?
I certainly do.
Where he says, are there any marketing people in the audience? Kill yourselves. I grew up in that. Being a marketing person was not a fucking attractive profession. You were an amoral scumbag if you went into marketing, right? And this has completely changed, and I'm finding that hard to adjust to.
Well, that is exactly the same position as me, because nearly daily I have to nearly daily I have to not quote Bill Hicks about marketing, and I'm not sure these days I'm not sure I agree with Bill Hicks's opinion on marketing, but it's still there in the back of my head saying, I mean, I did a media studies degree. My life goal, my job goal was to be a PR person and I just thought I just cannot do this. I don't find it rewarding. I don't find it. Anyway, I don't want to rail against people who go into marketing because that's not what I'm here to do. But I chose to go a different path. But the media is becoming marketing. Certainly, YouTube, which is the most popular thing, is becoming marketing. I don't personally think that's a positive thing. People who are doing it would say it is a positive thing, that they deserve to get rewarded for their time. Blah 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 blah. The industry. So I don't feel the media is in a particularly healthy place. I'll be honest. The industry, I don't think, is in a particularly healthy place because of this glut. And now you're starting to get publishers not admitting it, but recognising this. I listened to Board Game Insider, and Ignacy Timcik he talks a lot about how his print runs are lower. He doesn't get to do reprints of games anymore because there's a next, this glut, this swamping of the market. And while there are many people will insist there's not a bubble, there is clearly a bubble. There is clearly a bubble that's going to burst. There's far too much.
It feels like it's slowly deflating as we speak.
Yeah. And it may not burst. It may just deflate. But whatever happens, there's going to be some publishers that go out of business. There's going to be some people who lose some money, and there's going to be some people who lose some jobs. Because I don't think it's just the growth is dependent on getting new people into the hobby. Because as you mature in the hobby, you buy less and less. I was listening to a very interesting discussion of Beasts of War, who are some of my favourite YouTubers, who cover miniatures games, but about Games Workshop's previous strategy of catering to their fans, and they used to lay a massive banquet out for the new players, and provide loads of services to them and games night and things like that. Really encourage the new players in. And once they'd been in the hobby for 5 years or so, they used to unceremoniously push them out the back door, stop providing gaming space for them, because these people didn't buy anything anymore. You buy most of your games in the first 5 years. You buy most of your miniatures, your armies in the first 5 years. Then you've got enough, and you just keep playing with the ones you got. So they get shunted out the back door, and they end up joining war game clubs with old men with big beards and stuff like that, and turn into grumpy old men like me. And that level of growth is unsustainable, in my opinion. We are not going to be able to get in the amount of new players and new gamers, and not only just gamers, but new people who are new collectors is what the industry actually needs.
Well, I wonder to what degree the division that exists in the world is going to contribute to this. Because I remember when I first got into gaming, I was because this was sort of on the back of Gamergate, I got into board gaming. And I was really surprised at how untoxic board gaming was, how little people argued. And it seems to me it's degenerated over the subsequent sort of 6 or 7 years. And if I went onto board game Twitter now, I think I would say, fuck these people, I'm just not interested in this anymore, right?
Yeah, I'm not convinced board game Twitter is representative of board game culture.
That's by the by, though, isn't it? Because when you're at work, you're not at your game group, you're not experiencing board game culture. You're experiencing what you assume board game culture to be when you've got 5 minutes to flick through Twitter at work, and that's the shit that sticks in your brain, right?
But even so, I think more likely to be flicking through board game Reddit or board game Geek. I think board game Twitter exists with 500 people talking to each other. Is my view. And because we're in the media, and because it's one of the ways that we communicate with our peers, it appears to be bigger than it is.
This is possible.
Twitter's full of no. Twitter is a lot less important than Twitter thinks it is. I remember in the general election a while ago, back when Nick Clegg was Cleggmania. I don't know if you remember that. And my entire Twitter was full of people who were voting Lib Dem. Absolutely full of people. I'm inspired by Nick Clegg. I'm voting Lib Dem. I thought, he's going to do fantastically. He didn't do fantastically.
No, he did fuck all.
No. And I was like, I was genuinely shocked. And that genuinely brought home to me that this medium is just not as representative of society. And it's not representative of board gamers, I don't think. Because kind of going on to board game consumers, I think the industry's in trouble. I think the media's in trouble. Who I don't think is in trouble are the consumers. I think the consumers are in a better place now than board game consumers has been for a long time.
Absolutely.
There are still the kind of psychological traps you can get yourself into. There's the kind of fear of missing out. There's the rampant consumerism and things like that. But I mean, that existed 5 years ago as well. But I think board gaming is more inclusive than it ever has been before. I think if you were a minority or a woman, I'm not saying it's perfect, but you're a lot more likely to be able to feel comfortable in a group, because there's a lot more likely to be at least one or two people, who not you can identify with, because you can identify with anyone because they're human beings. But do you know what I mean? I feel it's more inclusive than.
Yeah, I think it has undergone a kind of transformation that football went after Italia '90.
Yeah,
football stopped being this very male, very working class, very sectarian thing, and over time developed into something that is still, quite male, but nevertheless much more inclusive. And to hear women, not just to see women on the terraces, but to hear them as pundits, and the next step will be female football managers, And board gaming has gone through that transformation where it's come out of the basement and into the the society, and it's not something that's inherently masculine like football may be construed as, right? And you see there's loads of women everywhere.
There is, and no longer I would have. Well, again, this is from my perspective of my experience. But heads don't turn when a woman walks into a game store, and that goes to the Magic stuff as well. Because I've seen in my game store there's a minority, but a significant number of women playing Magic and things like that with everybody, and heads aren't turning. Now there's a long way to go, and also I am a white middle class male. I know that I just because I don't see it doesn't mean to say it's not.
I mean, I think you're overselling the middle
stuff.
Class bit, but nevertheless.
Lower middle class. I've always been very, very keen to point out I'm lower middle class. But nevertheless, I'm in a privileged position, and I recognise that. But I think while there are still significant problems, and I don't deny that at all, I think we're moving in the right direction at least.
And I think there really is a divorce between the online world and the real world. Right.
Yeah.
And while there are absolutely no question there are dickheads on the planet, it's really interesting because I was speaking to a friend of mine and he works in new media. And we were talking sort of about Twitter, and his wife doesn't have a Twitter account and she doesn't really go on Facebook very much. And she was sort of the vitriol that we were talking about. She was really surprised by. And she said, is that how it is? Because that's obviously not how you live in real life. And I live in a liberal paradise. I lived in a liberal paradise in Berlin, and my game group is as close to 50-50 as damn it, right? Mm-hmm. And in terms of every shape, every size, every age, every colour. And I think we can fall into a trap of thinking that Twitter is the real world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it isn't. I may call you an asshole on Twitter, but there's no way I would say that to your face, right?
Yeah. And I've recently come to, as I was speaking to you before, I've recently come to the conclusion that Twitter, and to a lesser extent Facebook and Board Game Geek and Reddit, but certainly Twitter, was taking up far too much headspace compared to the reality that it reflects. But the other thing that's positive about for consumers, I'd say, the rise of cons, these big communal swellings,
I'm saying nothing. I am saying nothing.
You can slip one in if you want. The big communal swellings of people coming together to play games. There's more opportunities to play, and because of the widening diversity of people who are playing games, there's just more opportunities to play with people you enjoy playing with, I think.
Well, I was speaking to the mad Welsh wizard Andrew the other day, and he did a very similar thing to you. He split it up into groups. And he said, logistically there's probably too many games coming to the market, and we're seeing the smaller games struggle. And we're seeing a surfeit to the cult of the new, highly fueled by FOMO. And this is really interesting, because I don't have FOMO anymore.
No, nor do I, really.
And do you see it? That people are still super eager? I saw one in my gaming group the other day, and he's got 72 Kickstarters he's waiting for. Which is fucking insane. No? Mm-hmm. And that strikes me as huge FOMO, right?
Yeah.
I mean, do you see an issue in the encouragement to consumption? Do you think that's fundamentally problematic?
I do, very much so, but I don't think that's down to board gaming. I think board gaming is, again, with this corporatization and the monetary of board gaming, I think board gaming is catching up to the world in general. I think the this idea that we always need to grow, this expansion attitude is going to kill us all. If every year the GDP has to get bigger, otherwise we're failing. Well, why? As long as everyone's happy. Stock markets are rising. The more and more wealth, more and more physical possessions, more and more things. It is going to kill us all. You cannot sustain that. But it's not a ball game.
I mean, do you think how much truck do you have in my idea that part of the reason gaming has become popular is that people are scared shitless about what's going to happen in the future, and board games are something that feel homey and harken back to a childhood and a time that was simpler. Do you think that has any truck at all? Or do you just think it's pop psychology bullshit?
I think it's possible. I don't think it's anything to do with the modern age. I think you'd find it hard to identify a period of time where there wasn't uncertainty. It feels like the 70s were a very certain age and the 80s were a very certain age. Looking back on it, because we know it all turned out all right, but the threat of nuclear war, right, all that kind of stuff. I don't think there's ever been an era where everyone's been comfortable thinking, hey, it's all going to be all right from here, guys. Do you know what I mean? I think.
So do you think this is just narcissism? That my fear is the same as someone's fear who lived under the Bay of Pigs? I mean, I guess it must be.
I would say so. And I think just humans live in fear. I don't think it's narcissism. I think it's very valid to be concerned about your safety and your well-being, and certainly your family's safety and well-being, and all that kind of stuff. I'm not saying it will turn out all right. I mean, we're constantly living on a knife edge, and historically, all the massacres and the horrible things that used to happen all the way through history. There's not been a period of time where something horrendous hasn't been happening somewhere. Humanity is a wonderful thing, but it's also a terrible thing.
So this is turning into an episode of sporadic boards. We're not really talking about board games here. But where do you sit on the Steven Pinker thesis?
Oh, I don't know about Steven Pinker. What's...
So Steven Pinker wrote this book basically saying that we live in the best of all possible times, in the sense that the possibility of dying of violence is lower than it's ever been. And not just in the West, but globally. Mm-hmm. The possibility of dying of violence is lower than it has been throughout human history. Where do you lie on that? Do you think that's true?
I mean, with zero real knowledge of history or anything, or the it feels true. It feels true. I'm not saying it will always be like that, but certainly my parents' generation have been the luckiest generation ever to live.
Right.
They really have. There's been no, and again within the UK and probably within America as well, there's been no major wars. Economically, they've done very, very well. They're sitting on big. They retired early. They've got long life expectancies. They're relatively healthy. They're the luckiest generation to ever have lived. And who knows if that's going to be the same for us? It doesn't feel like it at the moment, but it won't have felt like it at the time for them. They'll be
right, absolutely.
When they were 40, they'd be again. I remember the threat of nuclear war was just constantly hanging over your head.
You were talking about this on one of your shows. Do you remember that ITV program where a bomb exploded in Halifax or something, and then it was a drama about what to do? And I remember there was one thing, and it was in a classroom, and there was a flash. And I remember that as a kid, and it scared the life out of me. This was on at like 8:30 on ITV.
Yeah. I know that I didn't ever watch it, but I do know the programme you're talking about. I can't remember what it's called now. I remember watching the bombing of Libya, or whatever we did, and being petrified that we were going to die, and going downstairs and asking my parents to move to Australia. But that existential dread, and I'm sure they were worried at the time as well. I'm not saying everything will be fine, but everyone, I don't know what I'm saying. But I don't think that's much to do with the topic at hand.
We could do to be a little bit less narcissistic, I guess, is the general message. Well, I was speaking to Richard Trout, Norkel, and he formerly lived in Australia.
Excellent.
And now he's in the compound. How the hell he got here, I don't know.
Swam.
Well, I assume on some sort of Antipodean beast.
We're probably a boogie. They like surfing over there. It'll be some kind of surfboard. He'll have paddled over on.
I was a little bit put out at his sort of bleach blonde hair and washboard stomach. I mean, I've lost a lot of weight, but I still don't have that sort of definition that seems natural to the Australian. And he says, with publishers mostly increasing the quantity of output, there does seem to be an oversupply, which makes it a buyer's market. But we should be happy about that. When I hear the moan that there are more games but far fewer greater games, I'm not aware of any statistics that actually support that. Now, I've spoken to you a lot, and you're I think doing kind of what I'm doing at the moment, is going back and reappraising older games, older designers, Rainer Knizia, Wolfgang Kramer. Do you think that we are suffering a dearth of good games? No, we're suffering a dearth of great games and are being overwashed by good games?
Yeah, no, sort of. Yes, no, sort of. I suspect there are more great games being published now than they were, and let's say 10% of games are great games. The problem is that the 90% is much, much larger number now than the 90% was 5, 6, 7 years ago.
But that 90%, do you think the quality of that 90% has risen? Because I don't play many broken shit-ass games anymore. I think it probably has. Yeah, I think there's an awful lot of good games. An awful lot of good games. I don't think the newer games I've played, I've not thought this is just awful. Mainly because I'm more selective in what I play, possibly. Right.
But yeah, I don't think there's been a decrease in quality of games, and I do think there's still some great games that are being published, and games that will stand the test of time. And there'll be some great games published that would have stand the test of time had anyone noticed them, because it's so hard to get noticed, right, especially if you're a smaller publisher. So yeah, no, I don't think there's a lack of quality these days. I just think there's too much choice. But that's fine. That's fine, because the other thing is, you don't have to know about every single game, especially in this massively crowded market. And that feeling that you need, leave it to somebody else, and 3 years later down the line, then you can, if they're still talking about a game, you think, well, I really should check that one out.
Well, absolutely. No, I was speaking to someone the other day, and they were talking about having just bought the Puerto Rico expansion, and that kind of tells you everything you need to know, right?
Yeah, exactly. So just as long as you are willing to let the masses filter out the good games and leave the great games spotted around. And by that time, you're not going to have to rely on people's reviews, because there'll be a consensus about what is good about this game, what's not good about this game. And that's what I'm finding much more valuable these days than a single video review from Rado or The Dice Tower or Shut Up and Sit Down or whatever. Is if you're looking at a game from 3 years ago, then there's going to be a relatively good consensus about if this is a good game or not. Now, granted, sometimes I like games that other people don't, so I'm not saying it's flawless, but that filtering, that read bed of 3 years, you'll miss some diamonds, sure, but there's enough to get through. If you only bought games that 3 years old, then you would have a fantastic collection, I'm sure.
And the thing is, I'm kind of hoping that we go into an age with gaming in which we go through reviews and into criticism. And I came up with a definition, the difference between review and criticism, a while ago. And I think what reviews are is whether you appraise something to be good or bad. What I think criticism is when you think about English criticism of Shakespeare. We all agree it's good, but this is why it's good. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think, and I hope that, as every art form matures, this is what happens, right? So you're no longer reading the local rag about whether I should buy this or not. It's that this game is one of the greats, and this is why I think it is. And I'm hoping that board gaming develops that, and people start writing long form pieces about why Puerto Rico is excellent, why modern art is excellent. And I think the state of the hobby is still juvenile, and I hope that in the next 5 to 10 years it matures, right?
And I don't think that's its fault. I mean, I think it's just the age. It's just the age. It's like rock and roll. I'm sure. The initial in the 50s, the rock and roll reviews was hey Daddy-O, this is really hip happening beats. And then as you, I'm down with the kids, me. And then as you kind of progress, 20 years later, you're really analysing what makes Bill Haley and the Comets good, or and
what really changed is you had that late 60s flourishing of sort of mature things pioneered by the Beatles. And I guess, have we had a board gaming Beatles yet? Someone who elevates this form that was considered disposable into something that is profound in the way that other works of art are, right?
Well, possibly you could argue the board gaming Beatles was Catan. It depends on what you're counting as the board gaming genre. Have we had the Beatles?
Well, there's a difference. There's a difference between Love Me Do and the White Album, right? Popularity doesn't infer sort of artistic achievement necessarily, does it?
No, but it doesn't not either.
Also true. Also true.
So it depends on how you're defining board gaming, really. If you're talking about board gaming as in the whole history of board gaming, say from the invention of Monopoly, I know board gaming goes beyond before that, but the invention of Monopoly and that whole thing, and then you would say the renaissance of the mid 90s was the Beatles moment,
right?
However, if you're just taking the hobby gaming from the mid 90s onwards, then no, I don't think we've had our Beatles yet. But I think it's more that we haven't had our rap or our, we haven't had that that switch where it moves from beyond its roots into something a lot more completely unrecognizable from the beginning.
I think it's starting to happen. I think games like Holding On and things like this.
I knew you were going to say Holding On.
I mean, I like miserable stuff. What can I say?
Yeah.
But games like Holding On are pushing the boundaries of the stories that games can tell, and I think that's a very positive thing by and large. Anyway, well, thanks for sitting around having a chat. Yeah. I've noticed you wanna put some super glue on that ear as it's falling off.
I like it like that, Ben. I like it like that.
Oh, is that a fashion choice?
It's rakish.
That's true. Rakish it is. But I've got to go off because, Janine's been away for a while, so we've got to rekindle our desire for one another. And I mean, looking at me, there's a hell of a lot of kindling required. But,
as a zombie, I can't feel nauseous, yet somehow I still do. I don't know what that's about.
Indeed. But as long as you're only extracting cerebella from the willing, I guess you're okay.
Thank you. And I'm only taking the negative aspects of people's personalities, so you could say that I'm providing a valuable service.
Now, if you want to get in the guild, first of all, have a shower. You smell like them screamers outside. Then go to the Board Game Geek Guild 3209. Now the leader wants us to make an offering to his eternal beneficence, so hand over them earrings.